Hello, I'm Megan, aka Just Run It, and this is Megan's Monday Musings. I have finished my Nanny Swimo sweater. Ta-da! This is the Midcoast by Knitwool Love, and I thought, in the grand scheme of things, I could do another sweater tip for National Knit a Sweater in a Month. But before I get into the tip, I just wanted to show off my sweater. I absolutely adore the pink. So in looking at those colors, I chose the pink, and then we did the provisional bind off on the sleeves, which a few people have been out on Instagram posting that they gave it a try, and I really enjoy that. When I was making those choices, I did not pay very good attention to the yardage requirements, and so when I got done with the pink, this was how much was left. So my sleeves are finished in a different manner. I was going to swap the blue and the pink and just have this be the blue, but then it's supposed to end with this cuff being in that, it would have been the pink here. So I ended up with a two-tone sleeve. But I like it, and it makes it uniquely mine. If you're familiar with the Amish, they always introduce a feature to make it so that it's not perfect, and this is making it uniquely mine. I also could not get those colors out of my brain, and so I knit up a hat with the green and the purple. And had quite the aha moment with this. So I just figured out the cast on that I was going to need to do. I did, because the sweater is kind of knit at a looser gauge than I would want a hat. I went down a couple of needle sizes, and so it would be a little more dense. And then I did the math to figure out how it would fit on my head. And then found the number of motifs and had a very aha moment, which was I could work the charts for the sweater from the opposite direction. So instead of doing increases like I did on the yoke of the sweater to get more stitches, I worked the opposite direction and ended up doing decreases for a very pretty crown. So that was kind of fun, and I'm kind of looking at other color work sweaters I've done and been like, well, what fun hats would that make? Yeah, whew, I love it. And now I can kind of wear it all at the same time if I wanted, rock the whole mid-coast look, or I have also had the thought that I could knit a scrunchie. I could knit some socks and some mitts and just have a whole mid-coast wardrobe. So I did have some leftover of the blue, and I've still got quite a bit left over. This Esopus from Jill Draper has a lot of yardage, and I had a significant amount, enough to have done just a one color sweater, let alone kind of sharing the love with some other colors. But as you can see in kind of some of the sweater here, there is some line. So I always alternate skeins when I'm working with hand-dyed yarns. This is very, very hand-dyed yarn. The skeins were drastically different between the two, and that kind of depends on, even if they're in the same dye lot, if they received the same amount of dye throughout. And so I've gotten bit enough times with not alternating that I just always do, because ripping out part of a sweater is not fun. There are some kind of cheater methods that you can do where you, at a certain point, you just start alternating instead of doing it throughout. So in this, I did not alternate through the color work because I did not think that you would really notice. But then once I got down to the main body, I made sure I had enough so that I could alternate on the sleeves, because that's another thing that I've hit, is that you work the body from the top down, and you get to the hem, and then you get to the sleeves, and it's a drastically different skein than where you ended on the sleeves, and you get a nice line across here, which is a look. And it's not to say that it makes the sweater any less beautiful, but I definitely notice it when I look at it. So yeah, I always alternate skeins. It blends those color differences, because it's just every row you're changing. The way that I do it is I introduce a faux seam under arm. You're not really going to be able to see it here because it's just one stitch, and then it kind of gathers around that one stitch. But rest assured, I did stop and take a photo of how I create that faux seam by introducing a purl bump underneath both arms. And then the one is just where you're changing the colors. And so ultimately what ends up happening is the new yarn traps the old yarn when you're bringing it forward for that purl. But again, I'll have some close-up magic video for you. Did not rip it out, just took a photo while I was in that place. There's other ways that you can do color change, alternating skeins as well. One that I've seen a lot of people have success with is the helix method, which I believe changes where you're doing that, that alternating of the skein, changing one color over to the other at a different place. I would worry about that if there were any sort of patterning or lace work or increases or decreases, but people have really embraced it that I've heard and have been successful with it. I think it's basically diametrically opposed to what I'm doing. So I am doing a structural element and always putting those switches in one place, and they are changing where it is so that you don't get a weird tensioning problem. Again, the nice thing with the purl bump is there's no tensioning problem because the purl bump is kind of recessed, it traps it, and even if you did over tighten or under tighten, it would be kind of brought to the back of the work. So with that, I will hand it over to past Megan, who recorded how she alternates skeins by creating a faux seam underarm. Thanks for joining me another week. Bye, Ufta.
So I'm going to show you how I introduce a purl ridge at the side, the underarm of a garment to help in switching colors, alternating skeins. So as you can see, I've got 2 skeins of yarn here that I've been alternating. This is the one that I used on the yoke, and this is the one that I'm transitioning to. Just to the naked eye, it looks like they're pretty close, although this one looks a little bit lighter than this one. And so through micro striping, which is actually alternating the color every other row, so every row is a new strand that I'm using. You can see that I'm getting a pretty good blend. There are some techniques that you can use to just do that at the very end, but I feel like this one is fairly easy to remember because there's always something to do once you hit this marker, and easy to execute, so it doesn't feel like it's a large amount of effort, but it definitely negates any issues that you have with lines showing up in your finished garment. So as you can see, I've been knitting along with this skein of yarn, and I get up to the marker, let the camera focus here, that I've got there just to remind me that there's a purl bump, and that I have to switch yarns. The last stitch that I knit with my old skein is on the other side of that marker, on the other side of that purl. So I'm going to knit to that marker using the old skein. And then this stitch can be a little wobbly because it's still got that strand attached to it, so you can retension there as needed. The old skein of yarn goes to the front, and then as you're bringing the new skein forward to execute that purl, that traps the old yarn in. So I'm going to again just continue on. So I'm now working with, and they get a little twisted, so I'm now working with the new skein, the one on the left here, and I need to zoop that one. But as you can see, I've transitioned to the new skein. The old skein, the last stitch worked is on the other side of that purl, and because it kind of gathers around that recessed purl bump, you don't have as much tensioning problems. So even if I had really over tightened there, that purl stitch keeps it loose, and then it's nice and tidy at the back of the work. You can see I've been alternating throughout, and it looks very nice. I also do a purl bump on mirrored on the other side, but I'm not alternating skeins there. So that is how I execute rather painlessly a alternating skeins. Other folks have other methods, but that's the one that I enjoy. I also kind of enjoy it breaks up the monotony a little bit to have something to do on each underarm seam, centered in the middle of the stitches that you cast on. And I love the results.